You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This isn't a blood hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that all of us love to frolic about in our free time. Spearheaded by, of course, Peter Arvera, the biggest frolicker we all know. The Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. If you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show, just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 194, Enemies and Allies. I will not be surprised if Paul Herman does not listen to this episode, because Paul doesn't like to read. This is not a comic book episode. This is a prose novel episode, and Paul is highly allergic to novels. So I don't know that he'll listen to this, but that's all right. You can reach out to him after you listen and say this is the best episode of the show yet, and make him read this book. Joining me, the man guilty of me having to read a book with no pictures. He's a recurring guest. He's been on here a few times. He's actually Joe Fornerato's boss. From the Fire Rises podcast, it's Eric Carter. Eric, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Well, thank you for having me again, Ryan. And since you mentioned, prose novels and kind of allergies to them, you just mentioned Joe, and he already told me, because I told him I was doing this with you, and he said, "Well, I'm not reading that." So I was like,
"Oh,
okay.
My goodness,
awesome!"
So he's expecting us to just tell him every element of this story, so he doesn't have to read it.
Go, I'm not doing that, because he's
okay.
I want him to read it, so you should. It's a great book.
Yeah. All right. So there's two people, Joe and Paul. Don't like to read. Okay, got it. Okay, good. Yeah, I think the last time that you were on. So it's getting so far now. Episode 194. Episode 200 is creeping up fast. 194. It's hard for me to keep track of how many times certain people have been on. We probably talked about this last time you were on, which was last summer, when we talked Beyond the White Knight. That was your last time on, wasn't it?
I think so. I was looking back through the episodes. I believe so.
Okay.
And that tracks, because that sounds like, that's definitely something I covered.
And that's so freaking nuts too.
Yeah.
Summer last year. It feels like it was closer to that. And then it's like I blinked and it was the winter, blinked again, and here we are in spring. And I know it sounds like old man of me, but it's like, it's true. Time's going a little way too fast. But I was trying to think how many times you've been on. And I was like, help me fill in the blanks here. The first one was Gates of Gotham.
Yes.
The last one you were on was Beyond the White Knight. It's those in between. Wait, Last Night on Earth.
We did Last Night on Earth. I think we also did White Knight, the original White Knight.
We did the original? Okay. So then this might make it that you're now on the 5 Timers Club.
And this would be 6, because we did the Dark Prince Charming as well.
There you go. And you know what Knox says? 6 is good.
6.
So I already said this is a good episode. Well, that's why we've hit we've hit it all. Yeah, so you and I heard you actually on your podcast, The Fire Rises, that you were proud of the fact that you're the only one on here that brought a book that I didn't like.
Yeah, it's great pride in that fact.
That
because I feel like you've done something if you bring a book onto the Batman Book Club that the host does not like.
You may not be the only one by year's end. Yeah, you can claim the first, but you may not be the only one. So there's a nice tease for you incoming. And I think it was Joe that said in that same discussion to you that about Batman R.I.P. and that Javi somehow continues to mix up that I don't hate Batman R.I.P. I loved the ride of Morrison's Batman, and then when it got to R.I.P., it got very frustrating. So that is the most frustrating book I've ever talked about on here. Your book is the
Yes.
only book that I don't like, but I always back it up by saying that, hey, but it was a good discussion because it was a reasonable conversation amongst adults about a book
Yes.
that one person really likes, the other one doesn't, but we can have a thorough discussion on um, pluses and minuses and where, we don't see eye to eye and where we do. And look at, and
It was an
you've come back
exercise.
since.
Yeah, it was an exercise in civility. There was no,
There you go.
no,
I would
tribalism.
have, if I were to have an episode where somebody comes on and we just throw it down, I elect Paul Herman. I can have Paul on him,
Okay.
and he and I can go, fisticuffs verbally. But we're not going to do that today. Today we're going to talk about a prose novel. Today we're going to talk about a story called Enemies and Allies. Now, this book, Eric Carter, as you well know, was released in 2009. It was written by Kevin J. Anderson. It was released in hardcover May of that year, softcover October of that year. I did not even attempt to look this up. You corrected me before we started hitting record that it is available digitally on Kindle. Maybe other places too. I don't know, but you said that it was available on Kindle. So let me ask you, which version did you read?
I read my handy dandy Kindle version on
Okay.
my iPad, and only because I have the first edition from '09. It's hardcover, but it's in one of these lovely Lowe's boxes that you see
Yeah.
behind me, Ryan, that the listeners can't see. But
Yeah.
I'm in the process of moving, so all of my nerdy stuff is packed away. So
Yeah.
I have a very sad office right now, Ryan. But
It's a very sad office.
for that reason, I had to read it digitally.
Understandable. But you've claimed that you do have an actual, you have a hardcover version. It's stashed away in a box. I have soft cover, but there's a caveat to this. At the bottom, there's a yellow line going across the bottom, and it says Advanced Reader's Edition, not for sale. So somebody broke the law and sold this to me. And we'll get more into that in just a second. And I hope I'm not about to out her because I want to give a shout out. Page 1. It says, to Katie, faster than a speeding bullet, Kevin J. Anderson.
Oh, is it the autographed edition?
So yes, an autographed edition. Shout out to Katie, whoever that is. Hopefully somebody didn't sell your copy and you weren't aware that you were unaware. But it's yeah, I've got it. But it says on the spine, 0509, and then on the back, like it's interesting of this advanced readers edition because it says marketing campaign and it's got like two classic, I'd almost say that they're like maybe Jose Luis Garcia Lopez images of Batman and Superman. And it says marketing campaign and that, it's going to be national print media campaign, author appearances in Denver, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, I like if this is a common thing of advanced readers editions, probably now everything's just sent digitally. I'd imagine when it comes to something like this, but if this is how it was back in the day, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I've never seen a copy like this before. I'd be a snooty boy though if I was Katie, and I'd be like, oh, but if I liked it, I'm like, oh, but I want the hardcover. Like I've seen what the hardcover looks like, and I like the cover of the hardcover more than this, the soft cover.
So there's a couple editions of hardcover, and there's
a couple.
So there's the original, which the cover looks much like yours with Batman's logo up top, Superman's logo at the bottom, and the title in the middle.
This
and
one?
Then yes,
is that the original cover? Okay, it's black with like a red outline on the bat symbol, red outline on the Superman symbol, and then white text with a red outline of enemies and allies. All right, carry on.
Yes. So that's the original cover. And then there's a paperback as well that recently came out that has a very stylized image of Superman and Batman on the cover. And then there's a newer hardcover that has the two logos kind of melding into each other at the top.
Oh my goodness.
So
I'm unaware. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that paperback that you have, I've never seen that before. So you've enlightened me on something because I didn't know that existed.
I call it the Katie edition.
Katie edition.
Shout out to Katie. Yeah, interesting. Oh wait, I've seen yeah, I don't know. Anyways, it's available. A couple different variations that people can get. Mr. Carter, when was the first time that you read this story?
Oh, let's see. So it was a it was a couple of years before COVID, I think. I
All
had
right.
not read it. I had not read it when it came out, of course. It was several years after that. But I remember reading it about a year before Holy Batcast did their Batman ISO challenge during
Mm-hmm.
COVID, where you selected your favorite Batman, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a novel and I was like, I know the novel I'm picking. And
Mm-hmm.
nobody, it's like people had a hard time finding Batman novels that they like to read. So a lot of people didn't answer that question. So, and there's more than people think, but this one
Yes.
always comes to mind for me because I know there's like the No
Gotcha.
Man's Land novel and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But that one immediately sprung to mind, and I had read it about a year before, so maybe 2018
Okay.
ish.
Um, Mine was actually this past week. Finished
Nice
it this
first time
morning.
read.
Yes, first time read 2024 finished a mere 6 hours before you and I started recording.
Very
So
nice.
it's pretty fresh in my mind. It's funny that you say that because I know the episode that you're talking about of Holy Backcast because of course I was like, oh, I'm interested to see what's the novels that being chosen and stuff. And yeah, the fact of people having I don't know if it was a challenging time to find some or if they just aren't interested, like good old Paul and Joe. Um, but I was like, there's actually surprising amount of like prose novels for Batman of story
Hmm.
or like stories themselves, but then also like a compilation, like an anthology book with a bunch of short stories. One of recent memory for me that I love is the Court of Owls story that came
Yes.
out. Maybe it was 2018. It was Killing Joke, Mad Love, Court of Owls. Uh, Court of Owls is like a sequel and a prequel to the Court of Owls story we know. It's not just a retread, and it was a fantastic. Oh, so
Yeah,
good.
that was a line of novels
Hmm.
that they did, and I can't remember what the name of the line was, but yeah, I think I've read all of those.
Yeah, Mad Love was really good. It expanded the Mad Love story. Killing Joke just it was another case of like the Killing Joke just doesn't need expanded. It is as it's best as it is. So
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed with that one. Then yeah, and Mad Love and Port of Owls both really impressed me. So maybe someday those will be talked about here on this show. Uh, Lastly, maybe you kind of answered this, but I don't know. You can open up to us, Eric, on why did you choose Enemies and Allies?
So we were just talking about memories and how many episodes have gone by. It's hard to keep up with things.
Hmm.
But there was an episode, and I can't remember if you covered a novel or something, but it sparked a conversation between you and I. I was like, would you be opposed to doing another novel on that? Because I think you did the Batman Forever
Oh yeah, I've
novelization.
done adaptations.
Yeah.
Those are the only ones. So Batman Forever, uh, The Dark Knight last year.
Hmm.
Those might be the only no, and then Mask of the Phantasm, this past winter.
Okay. So I think we were talking about adaptations, and I had asked you, because I like to do outside the box stuff anyway. Look at like Dark Prince Charming that we've done
Yeah,
between you and I, and Last Night on Earth. So I think I asked you, would you be opposed to doing a novel? And you said, well, it's a book, so as long as it's Batman related, yeah, I'm down.
Batman
Um,
in written form, it counts. Let's do it.
yeah, it's a Batman book club. It fits.
Hmm.
So that's why. It's a novel I really really like. I think it's a great Batman Superman story, and I think it's a worthy entry of the Batman book club.
You know what? It really is. Um, yeah. So I don't know. Let's dive into it. Let's just talk about it. Let's get into it.
Okay.
I think more. novelizations or prose or different things are going to be coming as well. So like exciting. I'm just dropping all these little teases for you today. Things are in the works, so it'll be exciting. But we're going to talk about enemies and allies. So this, as it says on my cover, on the hardcover, and everywhere, it says The Dark Knight meets the Man of Steel, which is interesting because you'd think like, oh, it's combining The Dark Knight, the movie. I mean, we know, yes, it's names for Batman and Superman, but also we'd think the live action, movies of The Dark Knight, the Man of Steel. But this came out 4 years before Man of Steel came out. So it doesn't apply there, but it's a good line for the front of the book, and it's got a really classic Superman logo, and I guess you'd say like a classic Batman logo. Um, both fitting for the time period, I think, of where this book takes place. The time period that this book takes place.
Yeah, I
1950s.
agree. Because the first time I saw this cover, because I didn't realize it was, set when it was McCarthyism,
Mm-hmm.
Eisenhower, all this, I was like, interesting logos because they look like throwbacks when you see the
Mm-hmm.
cover.
Yeah.
So because the Batman logo is 66-esque,
Mm-hmm.
maybe with a little Dark Knight Returns flair to it. And then the Superman logo, it looks old school. So yeah, I was very confused over the logos when I first saw this cover, but it makes perfect sense when you get into the era.
Yeah, which is also funny because I mean, granted, you knew by reading the synopsis on the back, or I did on the synopsis on the back, but a smart thing that Kevin Anderson did was like that opening. You could say opening chapter, but I don't know if it's even called. It's not even called anything. It's just like, 4 paragraph opening, but it mentions Sputnik.
Mhm.
Okay, there's your indicator of the time period. Okay, this is 1950s. There's a blending of fiction with reality, and then reality's a little mixed as well, which he humorously comments on at the very end, which we'll get to that eventually. But I mean, since we're not going to break this down every single story beats, do like let's just, I guess we can head off to the this feels like more of a Superman story to me than a Batman story.
Sure.
But Batman is, it also counts for the Batman book club because Batman is crucial to
Mhm.
the story. Like it is almost BVS before BVS. Um,
Sort of, yeah.
and I couldn't help but thinking while reading it, like in my head were little blends of BVS while also thinking Superman the animated series, while also visualizing Darwin Cook's New Frontier, while also visualizing um, Alex Ross. Like those, just I got different beats throughout this whole story with that, as well as like the movie Doctor No when it came to like Luther's Island in the
Mm.
Caribbean. So like all of that in a blender to me was this story.
Which he was not Mr. Anderson here was not shy about the fact that he took a lot of James Bond inspiration and he
Hmm.
peppered James Bond's name throughout this book.
He did. Yes, he did.
So yeah, there's some Dr. No in there. I can see that for sure.
I read, and granted, this was Wikipedia, but reading the enemies and allies page, they gave a little bit of quick little background of Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, and he was a sci-fi fan. He'd written, let's see.
He's done a lot.
Yeah, he's written a lot of like almost like extensions of universes. So like I said, like Dune, I think Star Trek in like prose form. He did a Superman prose book. He did a JSA comic story.
Yeah, and
Um,
I didn't know that until I was doing a little research for this episode. So I have now saved that JSA miniseries on my DCUI because I want to check
into
that out.
universe infinite, but
Ultra.
Ultra. Okay, via the Ultra. Um, but he had an interesting comment, and I can't find it here, where he just kind of said something about, okay, JSA Strange Adventures. There you go.
Mhm.
And then it says he had previously written a novel about the origins of Superman called The Last Days of Krypton, which came in 2007. Let's see, he did some X-Files and Star Wars and Dune. So yeah, he sci-fi guy.
He is. And
He
little
Go
quick
ahead.
side tangent. So the
Hmm.
Dune novels that he has written,
Hmm.
he's most of them he's a co-writer with Frank Herbert's son. So the original creator of Dune. He worked with his son to expand the universe, which
Nice.
I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah. Uh, let's see, he mentioned something about, and let's see. Oh, okay. Anderson commented on the difficulty in writing comics as prose, stating that, quote, in the comics, several pages of superpowered action can propel the story, but when you read it in a book, it's not quite so interesting. You need more parts to the story. I think that is a great quote that totally applies to this story. And I think as a reader, I can understand what he's saying because, in a sense, so the finale of this book is a big action, spectacle. And I'm just much in moments throughout the book, I'm more interested in the character dialogue interactions than I am descriptions of action, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
I loved Clark talking with Lois, Clark on his adventure with Jimmy, Bruce and Alfred in the cave talking, the exchanges between Batman and Superman, Lex's, Lutheranism throughout, like their dialogue and stuff. To me, it's like I totally get that, and I never would have put that together myself, the way that he stated it. But I'm like, yeah, I think while I have read, these novels and stuff and the description of action, I'm kind of like, okay, let's hurry up. Let's get to it. Okay, now what did he say? Oh, yeah, that's a good line. That's a good line. And I think there's a lot of that in here.
Yeah, and Anderson's descriptions as well. He's very descriptive with his world and how things are supposed to look because he doesn't have those panels and splash
Hmm.
pages. So he paints the picture for you. I loved the descriptions of the bat suit
Hmm.
in the book, like how he always described the cowl and the material it was made of. And there was one sequence where Batman was in the Batcave and he described the cowl sitting on the desk
Yeah.
like some sort of monster glaring at Batman. And I was like,
Hmm.
see, that's yeah. Give me a mental image. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So the story opens up, let's see, in the time period we said with the 50s, uh our introductions, we'll say, of introduction with Batman is we find out he's a year and a half in to Batmaning, and he's opened up, like, keeping a watchful eye on the Thomas and Martha Wayne Memorial Park, where he's watching people, and there is a woman walking her dog that then gets jumped, quote unquote. And then he finds out once he's in to save her that it was a trap set up by GCPD, because GCPD is still full of corrupt officers.
Mm.
And so this was a trap to try and get the vigilante known as Batman. So that's a good setting of, and I do think, and it applies to Anderson's, comments that we just said about, about emphasizing on, like, more parts to the story. We're getting characterization and a setting of the image of Batman, who's still a bit of a myth, but he does, people know that he exists, but the corrupt police department, and that's a story that we're familiar with. Like, we do
Mhm.
know of, like, yeah, Batman early on, he was, it was corrupt officers there in Gotham. And so that's like our setting for Batman, which I thought was interesting. it wasn't what I would have guessed. Oh yeah, it's almost like it's a cold open in Batman. You know, he's at an amusement park, and it's the Alice in Wonderland. It's the Mad Hatter, and he takes down the Mad Hatter, and that's our opening of Batman. It's back to the basics: Batman versus police.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a great setup. But it also, and I don't know if you want to go here yet. We can come back around to it at the end if you want to. This section leads into my biggest nitpick of the book. So
Let's just do it. Rip off the band-aid.
okay. So I love this setup that you have the first meeting between him and Gordon. It's very confrontational, and then you don't get really any more Gotham for the rest of the book. The rest of it is, like you said, it's very Superman focused, which the Superman stuff is great. But they kind of set the table for where we were in Batman's world, and we had that first big meeting between Gordon and Batman. It's like, oh, cool, what's going to happen there? Nothing. So you don't get to revisit that at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I didn't really measure up right now, but it's like in Gotham, so we have that opening at the park, and then it is Wayne Manor, the Cave, Wayne Enterprises. So there's
Yeah.
4 in Gotham. Superman based, you know, got the Daily Planet. We go to Smallville. I don't know if it goes to his apartment. I don't remember.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. The movie theater, but that's while him and Jimmy are on vacation
In Vegas. Yeah.
in Vegas. Okay. So I guess in Metropolis, it's the Daily Planet. But I mean, it's we follow Superman in Superman's world into other locations like Siberia and the Caribbean, out in Vegas, out in Area 51. Um, so it definitely just like by that, because that popped up in my head too, a little bit of like, yeah, and that's why this feels like it's a Superman story, because we have Superman pieces, and then in Batman pieces, you know, it's Batman. A little bit of Alfred here, a little Alfred later on, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well,
So
very, very much like you said earlier, it follows that almost BVS sensibility where it's a Superman story, where you've got Batman peppered in here and there.
yeah,
So yeah.
in
But
which
now
go ahead.
still Batman's still integral, because you wouldn't get to the ending without him. And there's a lot of very fun stuff between the two characters. But yeah, it's overall, I would definitely say it's more of a Superman book.
And it does a good job. I think Anderson lays the pieces of they don't meet up. Their worlds don't like, or I can't say their worlds don't collide. Their worlds collide sooner than you really think, but directly as far as Batman and Luthor, which I don't know how many I forget how many chapters in that even happens. That's kind of where the worlds kind of clash, is when Batman invades Luthor's mansion, and then as he escapes, he encounters Superman. And these were some of the elements that I felt like those were parts that I was thinking like I can't help but compare with Batman versus Superman. Of like, because literally in BVS, Batman invades Luthor property.
Yeah.
Literally, Batman's like in the midst of something and gets stopped by Superman, who wants to put a stop to Batman. Like, I was like, okay, these are like some, I don't know, it's interesting pieces or interesting parts, knowing they're going to end up, but they never clash like they do in the movie either, though, which I'm also glad that they didn't.
Yeah.
Batman had his skepticism because that's just who he is. And so I think that it was very appropriate in their first meeting, wasn't a,
A
fisticuffs.
throwdown. Yeah.
Yeah, because it didn't make sense. It's almost like he's still measuring him up. And then to Batman's credit too, Batman escapes Superman. Like, so he escapes Luthor Mansion, and then he also escapes Superman because he's that damn good and he's prepared for everything. And in
I
the
love the
process,
scientific mind of Batman in this book too, because he refuses for the longest time in the book to believe that Superman is what he says he is.
Hmm.
He's like, there's no way he's an alien. He's trying to figure out what kind of jetpacks he's using or augmentations, or if he's been genetically modified by Luthor. He doesn't want to believe that it can be outside of what he understands or outside of science.
Which is actually really funny. Anderson had mentioned something about how he liked the time period because of Cold War paranoia, like
Hmm.
aliens and alien invaders, um, and then like the nuclear war or the possibility of nukes. He liked all of that, and I guess I've never really considered it. So they do a flashback about how Lois got the story of interviewing Superman. They do that flashback in the story, which felt very Superman 78. And and it's upfront that Superman claims that he's not from Earth. But I guess I didn't like I appreciated in this story how Anderson is planting that doubt of, hey, at the time period, 1950s, like you look at like alien invasion, constant alien invasion. And the whole like Superman, is he the only alien out there? Is he really? I don't know. I don't think he's really an alien. He's from our planet. Like that skepticism of that. I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm, clearly not a Superman expert. Um, but for me, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool of putting it in that time period of, adding another layer of, questioning towards Superman because of the
Hmm.
thought of an alien. One, he claims he is an alien. And I don't know if I believe that. Okay, if I do believe that, are like in all these
Can we trust him?
movies, yeah, can
Yeah.
we trust them? Because all these movies, aliens are, they're coming to attack. They're the enemy, they're antagonists. And so I think that's, and then Jimmy is written really well in that almost like wide-eyed um Jolly G Willikers,
Yeah.
Jimmy Olsen, how he's even questioning with Clark and kind of like, do you think that the aliens are really, there's more of them? Do you think of ever, and stuff too, which is just kind of charming.
I love that
um
he has him call Clark Mr. Kent throughout the
Always the
book.
Mr. Kent. Yes.
Mr.
Like that
Kent.
just
Yeah.
works so well. I hope we see that in the Superman movie because I just think like my favorite parts whenever I dive into Superman stuff. It's so crazy to me because I could do Superman in or out of the suit. It's Daily Planet and Smallville. Those are
Hmm.
like those are my favorite parts of Superman stories. I have no freaking clue why. But that's just what I get drawn to more than him fighting aliens in the suit and stuff like that. Like I just like the daily life of Smallville, like small town cornfields, and then also Daily Planet itself can feel 1950s-ish and stuff,
Hmm.
and I like that too. Like it's a like literally like a bright, almost like warm, fuzzy around the lens kind of feeling in Daily Planet. And that's just what I pictured reading this every time they were in Daily Planet.
Well, yeah, and Anderson uses the time period so well because it was so smart for him to write it in this era because you can use, the alien B movie era stuff to kind
Yeah.
of build that mistrust. And Luther's the perfect person to plant that, be the catalyst for that mistrust, which he
Hmm.
does. And also you can use that Cold War era mistrust between the US and Russia and or Soviet Union as it was at the time, and the nuclear threats, like you said. And of course, Luther's tied into that too. So, everything that can be Machiavellian and evil, Luther is tied into it. So, and he's written so well in this book. It's so Lex Luthor,
Yeah. He is
a bastard.
yes, he is as I know slash expect Lex Luthor to be.
Hmm.
Uh his let's see. Okay, I guess I went off on a different direction. I said Batman's introduction. After he wraps up that night, he goes back to Wayne Manor where he has an interview set up with Clark Kent and Jimmy Olsen from the Daily Planet. Uh that's our introduction to Clark Kent.
Hmm.
Um and much like you said with the time period, I love the fact of going back in that time period because taking many steps back of available technology. I like having less of it for stories because I think it becomes more about characters than the pieces of equipment in that regard. And so that focus of the characters I think was really smart and wise and got me invested in this book more so than just descriptions of new pieces. And also like it gets, hey, back then, how do you get a story? You have Clark Kent reporter, grab your notepad and your pencil and your photographer Jimmy Olsen, go to Wayne Manor and talk to him and have Jimmy
Mhm.
take pictures, which I think was a funny description of how, Bruce posed for the picture and everything. And literally talk in person, jot it down, and then leave. I like, I don't know, it benefits from taking the story back rather than making it present day. The stronger for it, I think.
And the personas, he just nailed it in that first meeting between Bruce and Clark, because you've
Hmm.
got Bruce putting on his Playboy front and he's drinking a fake Vesper from James Bond. You know, he's got the quote unquote martini, but it's just
Hmm.
water with lime in it.
Hmm.
And Clark Kent is just not impressed at all, because you
Yeah.
see Clark Kent morals and his, you know, his code, and he does not approve of this flashy playboy who just, you know, stays out all night partying and blah 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 blah. So yeah, just the two of them bouncing off of each other. I thought Anderson did a really great job of setting those two very distinct tones,
Yeah.
but also like when Bruce has to flip that switch later, where he does have
Hmm.
to become a little more of um the Batman side of Bruce, but also the more responsible corporate Bruce that he has to become.
Yeah.
That's written very well as well.
So that's what I think. He starts off almost being Dark Knight trilogy Bruce Wayne,
Hmm.
and then turns into Batman the Animated Series Bruce Wayne, in my eyes. Because I think the animated series Bruce was the do-gooder that was, he was a public figure doing for good and benefiting money, and people still, if of any incarnation and stuff, I think that's almost maybe the Bruce Wayne that it is like, people, how are you not putting this together? But I liked it because it was like Bruce Wayne doing things publicly, um, in both work, but the evolution and when he has to flip that switch is related to Wayne Enterprises and Luthor Corps because Bruce, TDK Bruce Wayne, we get a good scene with him showing up with the board of directors, and you understand, like, it's setting of like, oh, okay, this is how people at Wayne Enterprises see him. That at
Hmm.
first I didn't have any idea that this story was going to go and lean into there's more than meets the eye with this board of directors. I thought this was just like a scene building, a character building scene of like, this is how Wayne Enterprises sees Bruce Wayne. Is eye rolling, hey, give him some logos to pick out that's just kind of like dumb work, makes him feel important, and then let's get him out of here. And then Bruce, being the real Bruce, sees that one of the longest, serving board of directors just, he resigns and he's out of there. And he felt something was up with that, which me as a reader too was kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious because Bruce Wayne just doesn't say that. And he sends Alfred to go and talk to the man and finds out what's really going on at Wayne Enterprises and that the board of directors are in cahoots with Lex Luthor, getting
Yes.
paid to give basically all these plans and these developments of Wayne Enterprises to Luthor so that he can then beat him to the punch to the government for weapons manufacturing and self-defense, like defense systems and all that stuff. And all the board of directors are all a bunch of shady people. And Lex, typical Lex fashion, he's got the dirt on him, on all of them, which
Hmm.
I think that was at least following Batman suiting up and like digging deeper into all the board of directors and like uncovering a couple of what they're, what's this one's secret, what's this one's secret, and all that stuff. That was really interesting to me, and I thought kind of fun.
Yeah, and I love that whole investigative process he went through to find out either was it just greed or was there motives, and for several of the board members there were like threats against their families and things like that. But I love the chapter in the book where he confronts the board
Hmm.
and like just
Me too.
just smacks down the law of this is what I know and this is what we're going to do. And I also love that many of them want to resign. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you're not doing that. This is what we're
Mm-hmm.
going to do because you're going to continue to feed Luthor information, which ends up being almost Luther's ruination
Mm-hmm.
near the end of the book because we find out that Bruce has been giving the board members these altered plans that they've been pushing to Luther, and these plans are not going to work.
No.
So,
And yeah, and
yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So like you said, that's a scene I would love to see. And I totally get, I'm not dumping on any versions of Bruce Wayne. It's like, oh, I think that's something that we could see of what you just described, that scene, that public Bruce Wayne somewhere, really just throwing
Mm.
down. Maybe we got a little bit of Bruce and Max Trek in Returns when they're meeting one on
A little
one.
bit, yeah. The power surplus, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of that there, but because this thing, because it's just like like you said, almost like a yeah, you know, and how he
Well,
doesn't, and he covers his bases too, because he's like, James Gordon of Gotham City Police Department. I've already given him all of access to all of this. I have security
yeah.
guards right outside this room, and so he's just like, you guys are screwed. Oh, and on top of it, you're not resigning. You're going
Mhm.
to continue so Luther doesn't keep anything up. And can you imagine of like go enter that world of fiction and you're one of them and how they're all just like shitting their pants. Like, oh,
Yeah.
where did this guy come from?
Exactly.
None
Kind
the
of like
wiser.
the didn't you get the memo moment
Yes.
at the end
Yeah.
of Batman
Nice.
Begins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just get them. Ah, perfect. Which I'm not surprised, but I was waiting for a Lucius drop somewhere. I'm like, okay, but maybe, okay, maybe he just didn't want him. That's fine. But Lucius at this
I,
time period in 2009, coming off two movies of Lucius Fox where he made a hell of a dent into, you know, what is it, like general audience from those two
mhm.
movies. One, the character, because he was written so well. Two, performed by Morgan Freeman, that now it's hard to imagine like there is no Lucius. So the Batman didn't have Lucius in it. It's like, oh, but he's coming, right? Like, we're getting a
Totally.
Lucius sometime.
I feel like with this, with like last days of Krypton that Anderson had done before this, and then Enemies and Allies, I feel like there could have been maybe, and I have no idea, this is speculation. It feels like there could have been more books, like this could have been a series, and for whatever reason it just stopped here. Because it felt like there could have been
Mm.
a setup for future stories,
Hmm.
um, where they could have expanded Batman's world and Superman's world and wherever else they wanted to go, but for whatever reason just didn't happen.
Maybe for historical purposes. Uh, 50s were a different time, obviously. But also so to have Lucius Fox in the story that high up, like I don't know, maybe there's like to try and be a little in tone with the
Accurate,
times.
maybe.
Maybe that was a
Yeah.
little hard to justify. Maybe also was the pure fact of like I just Googled to just double check, that it says publication history, January 1979 was Lucius Fox's um debut. Batman number 307, January 1979, which would have meant it came out in 78, probably, because the thing on the front of the comics is usually ahead. But, anyways, late 70s is when he was created, so maybe that too. I don't know. Also, not a big deal because this Drayling guy, um, he didn't have much, but I was on his side. I just felt
Hmm.
like I felt for the guy and how he was his resignation speech really hit Bruce. And then you find out like he wasn't the whistleblower because Alfred went to him. Um, but there's something warm too of Bruce proposing that to Alfred and Alfred like accepting the assignment to go and talk to him, find out what's going on and whatnot too. Because it's just like Bruce and Alfred, there's no clashing of those two in this book either. Alfred's
No.
there as a great, warm, supportive character with everything.
Hmm.
And then he even does, like later on, which we'll get to, make sure I come back around to this too, where he does talk to Bruce in the cave before Bruce goes to Siberia. And I think that's another good speech. And that's just like, man, there's so many moments of like Michael Caine and then Michael Goff where they have these good lines of like, ah, damn it, I love Alfred. And it's just like he had some of those lines in this book too. He didn't have a ton. I'm not going to oversell that this is an Alfred story. He didn't have
No.
much, but like makes it count. And I feel like that's freaking Alfred, man. Like if he doesn't have a lot, he makes it count when he does show up. So
Yeah, and there's a little bit of Jeremy Irons in there too,
yeah,
in
yeah.
like he's trying to convince Bruce, maybe this Superman's not your enemy. Maybe
Hmm.
you should, maybe he is what he says he is. He's trying to be that
Yeah.
positive force, even though Batman's very mistrustful of Superman at that point.
Hmm.
But the Drayling character, the board member,
Yeah.
he worked with Thomas Wayne. He was a good friend of Alfred's. Kind of did it give you the vibes of that one board member from the Dark Knight trilogy who tells Bruce, the apple has fallen far from the tree, Mr. Wayne.
Fall from the tree, Mr. Wayne. I didn't think about it,
Yeah,
but yeah.
because he
I
had
guess
worked with Thomas.
visually, I got a little visually. I was picturing is it Senator Leahy, the
Oh
guy
yeah.
that was in those and Batman and Robin and stuff. Um, and then got blown away in Batman vs Superman. Like, yeah, visually, I guess maybe I saw something of like him, but yeah, I think it's more fitting to the guy that you talked about. Uh,
I can't remember his name.
let's talk about Lex. So
Okay.
where you've told a little bit of how a big connection, what gets the ball rolling for Batman and Superman to meet up is because of LexCorp and Wayne Enterprises. And Lex, from very early on in the book, were taken to Siberia. I want to ask you something. We learned over the course of many chapters of like a meteor shower in 1938. Gee,
Mhm.
why 1938?
Very
And
clever.
um there many pieces produced rocks of like radiation in Siberia.
Hmm.
And Lex is there talking to a general who ends up being his partner, if you will, his contact throughout the whole story, who Lex ditches and doesn't concern himself once Lex has his eye on the prize later on. But we learned very of like this, the green rock, causing radiation effects to workers, these prisoners basically, in Siberia. You as a reader, so there's no visual cues here at all. It's all in description. I forget what it's called when it's a characters don't know, but the viewers slash readers know. Are you one that likes to know right ahead, like you're like, oh man, this is about kryptonite? Or would you if somehow it's just revealed way late in the story of like, oh damn, that's kryptonite?
I don't know that I have a preference. I will say I think it's hard when you're talking a Superman story
Hmm.
and you're introducing like this mineral that's affecting people that your mind doesn't immediately go, okay, it's some kind of kryptonite.
Exactly.
So it didn't bother me that they set it up so early, and especially because of Lex's interest in it so early. Even if they didn't make hint that it was kryptonite, Lex's interest would have automatically cued you in on that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I didn't mind it, and I honestly don't know if I have a preference for
I
how
don't
that's set
either,
up.
but I just feel like there's like you just said too, of whether it is, even mentioned rock. Um, you're like kryptonite. Hey,
Yeah.
a meteorite. Oh, kryptonite. Like we just know now that I don't know how they could ever hold back the surprise and get us with it when we just know. Instead, and maybe this is part of in a way connected to like the Hitchcock and the grenade under the
Mm,
table example. And it's like, okay, so we know very early on Lex is understanding like, okay, we've got Kryptonite, we've got Lex, and we've got Superman. When are the three gonna collide?
mhm.
Maybe that's a device that's used in these stories and it works, and that's what we're accustomed to. Oh.
What I do find interesting is it basically takes Lex out of the equation with the kryptonite, though. With Batman
Hmm.
stealing it from his mansion,
Yeah.
Lex never gets to use it on Superman. It's this Russian
Hmm.
general that ends up using it. What I did think was very interesting about the use of kryptonite in this story is the prolonged exposure effects that it had on humans in
Yeah.
this story, because
Yeah.
that's not something that's very common with Superman stories.
Yeah.
Because
It's
usually it doesn't bother humans at all, but in this it does some nasty things to humans if they're prolonged, exposure to it.
and I appreciate that being you associate like, oh, Lex has got kryptonite and he's using it, he's weaponizing it against Superman. Anderson, maybe he did that purposely of like, well, let's take that off the table. Lex
Mhm.
doesn't get to weaponize it against Superman.
Yeah.
It's his piece is stolen by Batman. Batman doesn't use it on Superman. He's just observant of seeing when Superman gets close to him when he has it. He felt weak. And then to learn later on when Superman goes to Siberia, he accidentally exposes himself to it. And you hear like, and he's realizing like, oh, that's what's doing it. And Batman picks up on it too. Luthor never gets to weaponize it. And so I think maybe that's a good uh spin, a way to differentiate the story from what we commonly expect. It made Lex do something different. And
Yeah.
I liked that and I appreciated that. And no, of course, in the I don't this was it Saradov? Maybe it was the
Saradov, yeah.
general. No, I don't. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, man, I really hope he shows up in James Gunn's Superman movie. Like, I don't care about this guy. He felt almost cliched general. But the fact of you used Lex in different ways, I appreciated, while also keeping him exactly the kind of character that we know him as.
Yeah, I mean, the Saradov character, I liked him for the story. I don't know that I need to see him again. But I did like him in the story in the fact that he was one I like to hate because he was
Yeah.
sleazy, um,
Sleazy, slimy,
just greaseball.
egotistical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Ugh.
and I will say his ending is
Mhm.
horror movie stuff
Oh,
because
oh,
you've got all these
yeah.
people that are prisoners at this gulag that he runs, this general runs, and you've got a nuclear reactor there.
Mhm.
And so he's got all these people that he's enslaved basically to do his work here.
Which the description of what's going on there was really, which Lois starts to expose. And we'll get to Lois here. Let's go to her next. But she
Okay.
exposes too. I think Anderson does a really good job of kind of like really getting you, like adding to this general's like scum, like total
Yeah.
scum bucket for what he's doing.
Yeah, but these prisoners are just slowly, as they're exposed to kryptonite, they're turning into these monsters, basically.
And you know what I envisioned there that I left out at the beginning? I envisioned the monsters in the Arkham Asylum video game after they get exposed to the venom. Because
Yeah,
there's even
I
a
did
description
too.
of like almost like a spiked hair or whatever. I'm like, well, these are the
Like the
dudes in Arkham
Joker
Asylum.
Venom, yeah, Venomed out Joker. Yeah, that's kind of the visual I got too. And it's just really creepy
Yeah.
descriptions. And at the end, I mean, they go after Saradoff.
Mhm.
And the only way I don't know why he did this, but the only way he thought to escape is to go into his nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
And just his death as these creatures are surrounding him and everybody's exposed to this nuclear radiation and he Anderson lays it out as if their skin is just dripping off of them but they've got these big grins and then
Yeah.
he lets you imagine what happens next because the chapter ends with them closing in on Saradoff and
Which
it's
is the
like that
most
could
impactful because Eric, I'm a
yeah
sick son of a bitch. So like he met a
yeah
very bad ending, probably worse than Anderson was thinking. I was like, oh yeah, this is some gnarly stuff.
yeah
Um,
but that the sequence from when they come back because Saradoff sent them after Batman and Superman. Of course, the monsters didn't catch our heroes, but they come back. The sequence from when Saradoff starts to escape, his guards get torn apart by the monsters, and then
mhm.
the whole chase through the nuclear reactor. That could be a horror movie because
Yeah.
it whoa.
Lois Lane, you heard of her?
Hmm.
Um,
I have, yeah,
she she is utilized, I think, really well in the story also. And her it's always fun her insistence to Perry and Perry's quote pushback in these stories. I quickly think of Lawrence Fishburne and BVS too, of like Lois comes in, wants to do whatever, and then Perry's just like, she's gonna get what she wants because he knows, yeah, let her go. She has a story. She's gonna get the story. It's good for the planet. She's onto something. Felt that in here too. Perry did a
Hmm.
little bit more pushing back, but then she would come back with more evidence of like, I have a story. I need to go here. And the Blanche, um, not from the Golden Girls, because poor Blanche in this story, a former Luther employee, she is a bit of a whistleblower to Lois, and you get to hear because it's Lois's source to find out about on Luther Island, what's going on
Hmm.
Luther Island. That's not on the maps anywhere, and what Luther's up to. And this is where it's great. Luther's not here in this scene at all, but we're getting more characterization of him with other characters, and
Yes.
Lois's investigation really helps add to that and his villainy because you meet this lady that wins you over. Lois meets her at a diner and the woman orders two sandwiches and tells the waitress, wrap one to take home, and then kind of just looks at Lois as like, I hope you don't mind. And Lois says, a girl's got to eat, or a woman's got to eat, because it's just like, yeah, because Luther has screwed these workers so badly. This woman has nothing. And it's like, oh my God, somebody's going to buy me a sandwich. I need another so I can eat tonight, sort of deal. And then this
Mm.
reminded me, like, sorry, there's just, I'm quickly as I'm reading this, and I'm thinking of the World's Finest Cartoon 2 episode thing. I'm thinking of movies of Batman and Superman, cartoon and live action. And I think of the woman that gets pushed in front of the train in BVS. Like Luther
Yes.
basically has people hunt her down. The same thing happens with poor Blanche. Lois is going to meet up to get more evidence and whatnot on Luther to get him. And sadly, she was in a hit and run and she's just dead. And Lois arrives right as the ambulance does to put the sheet over her. And it's
Hmm.
just like, oh man, Luther, you son of a bitch. Because flat out, like he did it. He didn't like physically drive the car, but
He set it up.
he
What a
set it
dick.
up. Yep.
Yeah.
What a dick. Um, but yeah,
So,
Lois, I think is good throughout this with the reporting,
and
and then
she gets a
she's
lot to do.
she does. She has a lot to do, and especially as because you got to keep, as the big finale, Batman and Superman are occupied in Metropolis. She's down on Luther Island, but Anderson creates a situation of like, okay, how are we going to wrap this up while, make it all like put a bow on each piece.
Hmm.
And Lois is the key. Uh she does she's caged in a sense. She's in a cell on Luther Island, but she smartly and he does a good way of figuring out of describing how she gets out and basically is like she's the whistleblower on this as well, alerting the army while because Batman and Superman discover what's really going on in Metropolis, but they don't have a way to mass communication that to everybody. But Lois finds a way. And I think that too is done really well. And then it's like the personal private Lois, she's got like a little soft spot for Clark because he's so innocent, but she
Yeah.
is a swooner for Superman.
For Superman. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Weak in the knees for the Man of Steel. Oh, red
Yeah.
and blue.
And even I mean, she is critical to the finale of the book because she's
Hmm.
trapped on the Luther Island
Yeah.
and so clever the way that she gets out of her cell and confronts it. And I love that even though General Sam Lane's not a big part of the book, he's still big enough where she knows she needs to get in contact with Sam Lane. And she sneaks into Luther's headquarters to send out a message of what he's doing.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know why, but every time I hear Sam Lane now, I see the guy from Superman and Lois. I just can't. That's the Sam Lane I have in my head now
Oh,
for
yes.
that character. So
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, I love that she's instrumental in stopping Luther at the end.
Hmm. Yeah, I look how sneaky she is, but not beyond like eye rolly. It's like, no,
Yeah.
this just kind of feels like this is what Lois Lane would do. This is what
Hmm.
this is what she would do. Uh let's see. Because we're creeping in on an hour, and I feel like we have so much that we haven't talked about with the book. Um, to
But it's a
speed
300
through,
page book. It's
yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, and I mentioned something about when Superman gets exposed hardcore to the kryptonite in Siberia, and Bruce in the world knows that Superman's in chains in Siberia. Bruce is in the cave with Alfred, and there is like a good discussion between the two that's like encouragement. And Bruce even says, as he internally is, thinking like almost like a pros and cons list of Superman's
Hmm.
good, Superman's not. Uh, and I mean, how he even says to Alfred of like, obviously I have to rescue him, Alfred. And then it's like a bat plane discussion. They're getting the bat plane ready to go and everything. I visualized throughout this whole thing. This is the new frontier connection I got of Cooks, both like the animated movie and the actual comic itself. Like, I think it's the movie that was added in the movie of like a cave scene. And I just like, that's what I got every time he was in the cave here was this Darwin Cook vibe from that era. And I'm just like, oh my God, I love this. I love this so much.
I saw Darwin Cook in everything except for the Batwing. That just 89
Oh my
pops into
gosh,
my
yeah.
head every
Yep. No,
time.
dude,
Yeah.
I was seriously gonna say that next. Like the bat plane was the 89 bat plane. I think it's
Yeah.
always the 89 bat plane whenever I have to picture it myself. Um, oh, there's something a big a big piece of all of this, like we've touched on a little bit, was the idea of aliens.
Hmm.
And a big portion, or at least it feels like, of this story is Jimmy and Clark have to go out west because there's a UFO spotted, which sent Superman and these jets to go after it. And a Luther plane jet itself comes between all of them and this UFO. And then all of a sudden the UFO just disappears.
Hmm.
Sends so that brings Perry to send Jimmy and Clark. And I always loved like a lot of this too, is Perry's very much of like, I'm not paying for any steaks. I'm not paying for any steak. We'll eat hot dogs, Perry. He's very cheap. Um, but I feel like this laid groundwork that pays off at the end. And then also I felt like it went on a little too long. Um,
The like
when
the
they're
Area
out west.
51 hunt. Yeah.
Yeah. Wherever they showed up first, like out when they drove, because they went to Vegas first, they caught a sci-fi movie, Alien Invasion. And then they drove what seemed like forever. Just Clark and Jimmy drove forever to this, you know, deserted town out in the desert in the middle of nowhere, and went into like a tavern where there weren't many people because they said like, oh, there's a guy here. There was a ship that crashed here. Can you take us to it? And then the guy does, and then there's nothing there. And it's almost like this was taking a while to just get to. When in reality, what they needed to do going out west was just uncover Area 51, the UFO that's there. And
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
like a link, you know? They spent a lot of time, but it wasn't like in the process was more, character bits. I just think the guy in the the guy in the tavern that took him to like this is where it was, and there's nothing there now, so there's no evidence or anything like that. Um like I don't know, like maybe I don't know. It just drug on a little bit, and I'm like, in the end, how crucial was that guy to the story? In which the crashed ship, was that the one that was in Area 51, or is that the Luther Court one? Like it kind of doesn't. I don't know that it had much to do with the rest of the story, though.
I could see that. I could see where maybe that's an area where, because this book is just a hair over 300 pages.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like 304. I could see that maybe being a section where maybe the publishers were like, we need this many pages. So maybe he had to maybe he had to fill the gap. But yeah, it does feel like it's the most unnecessary part of the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Because they really didn't need to go to Area 51 or out west at all, because we had the setup with Luther's plane interfering with the
yeah.
chase. And then we find out later that the quote unquote alien invasion that
Mm-hmm.
happens at Metropolis are Luther created ships, and it's all
Yeah,
a mirage. So yeah, I think you could have done that without the Area 51 stuff. So I could get that. I don't hate it, but yeah, I could
exactly.
see it.
I don't hate it either because it does, adds on to this the whole conspiracies of aliens that was, at the time, aliens were,
Hmm.
heavy on the minds of all like pop culture at that time. on the minds of people. We're like, there's UFO, aliens exist. Yeah. So I get that, but yeah, like my link by that ending of, the big final act of the invasion, like these ships, it's like, yeah, my mind goes quickly to the one that the Luther jet came in between. It's like,
Mm.
oh, okay, that was like a test flight. In my mind, it was like that was a test flight, and a Luther jet got in between so that the Superman or the government didn't destroy it, and then it just disappeared. It's like, yeah, that's where my link goes. Was like, see, we teased you a little bit, laid some breadcrumbs there. Not anything. What did I get out of Planet 51? Planet 51?
Area
Area
51.
51. I didn't really get anything out of that one.
It fits the time period that they're going for, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I the alien invasion, and I found it here. There's an alien invasion, and there is an alien that gets broadcasted on all these TVs. Some very expensive for the one percenters, colored televisions.
Mhm.
The alien speaks. The planet you call Earth is now under our dominion. Surrender or be destroyed. We have monitored your radio broadcasts in order to learn your language. We have no interest in dialogue. You will hear only our demands. All inhabitants of Earth are now our slaves. Cooperate, and we may allow some of you to live. And then he drops this line. Your females may be useful for breeding purposes, since our males find them pleasing. Like, that just kind of came out of nowhere to me, and I was like, I need to bring that up because it's just funny to me and listening, and also like, what the shit was that? Like,
I I think that was maybe a little bit of Anderson having a chuckle writing
I
that
hope
line.
so. Because then
And
it says
probably
the alien paused ominously, and then it continues, if we do not receive your unconditional surrender within 1 hour, we will level your cities one by one. So, yet again, it's a line that really stands out of
well,
our
and we
males
know that
find them
these were
pleasing.
we know that they were fabricated by Lex Luthor, so
Yeah.
maybe that is just one more nail in the coffin that Lex is a scumbag.
Oh my gosh. It's just, yeah, it's just like, oh my God. Like, it made me laugh, and yeah, it's just
Yeah,
funny to me. Uh,
it was very oh god, what are the Simpsons? What are the
oh
aliens?
shit, I don't remember. I know who you're talking
Ah,
about.
yeah, you know who I'm talking about though.
Kind of
It
like them.
reminded me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because even instead of like a cyclops, you know, big eye right in the middle of their forehead. We do get a fun little trip, very brief, Fortress of Solitude.
Mhm.
Which I don't see where else in the story that could work, or that we needed more time at the fortress or anything like that. It was just like oh, okay, that's cool. After Batman saves Superman, they go there, and that's basically where Superman heals completely and gets back to normal. Um,
Mhm.
Also does characterization for Batman into seeing more of Superman, and basically Superman winning him over a little bit more.
Well,
That
and
way.
it's a sign of trust that Superman
Yeah,
would bring him there.
yeah. And um, let's see. Like I said, so towards the end, Lex has a good, justice. Seems like justice um is due for Lex Luthor. But I do like in a totally Luthor way too. This is why it's like you like to not like Lex and you want him in your
Mhm.
Superman stories. Let's see. The judge, talking about the judge when he's in court. Looming over him, the portly, sour-faced judge said rather snidely, I believe, Mr. Luthor, that our penal systems use a model of electric chair designed and built by Luthor Corps.
Mhm.
Not at all rattled, Luthor gave the judge a cold smile. Then, Your Honor, I am confident it will work properly. Like, I don't know. It's like mixed feelings of like, what an arrogant prick, but then also like, that's kind of awesome. Like, as a villain, as the character of Lex, it's like, man, it's kind of cool. Like, well done. Staring at
That
death,
is
basically, and he's like, hockey till the end.
that's to me that's Michael Rosenbaum Lex. That's not Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
Because I could just see Rosenbaum delivering that just cool.
Yeah, I think he could deliver it cool. I think Eisenberg could deliver it like a little prick.
Yeah, true.
Like a little prick. Where yeah, I think Rosenbaum could hit it, could just completely nail it. I like Eisenberg's Lex. I just think, yeah, like you said, I think Rosenbaum would be the so far live action Lex that nice. At the
Yeah.
very end, not surprising at all. I love the writing of the book. Does each chapter, the top third of each chapter has either the bat symbol or the Superman symbol, which I love.
Not
And then
present in the digital edition. Kind of bummed me out.
it's not.
No.
Oh, that sucks. Oh, you got ripped off. But your hardcover edition, you do remember like it has each
Yes.
chapter has the logos. Okay. But the book ends in Gotham City, and it basically says the location, which I love that too. Of like it tells you in each chapter is just the location of where it takes place. And I love that. But yeah, it has the logo in the top third. So it's the logo is Superman, but yet the location's Gotham City. And I knew this is the last chapter, and I thought that was fun. But Kal-El found Batman sitting among the gargoyles on a rooftop in Gotham City. Like, yes. Like, yes.
And
Batman is one
the
with the gargoyles.
and the final two paragraphs, so
Mhm.
great.
Yep. Exactly.
Because it's Superman basically telling Bruce, because he's used his X-ray vision, I know who you are, basically your secret's safe with me.
Mhm.
And without missing a beat, Batman lets
Yeah.
him know, I know who you are too, and your secret's safe with me. And I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah. And he says that because they talk almost like they talk about how they're both necessary and they're gonna fight, for justice and all that stuff. And Kal-El, he says, you thought I wanted to be your sidekick? Batman says, I said I don't need one. Clark says, neither do I, but we don't always have to operate alone. We don't have to be alone. Sometimes we'll encounter problems large enough to warrant cooperation between us. There's got to be some sort of trust. And Batman nods, agreed. Kal-El, and in that spirit, I promise I will never expose your real identity, Bruce Wayne. You can trust me, Bruce. My word is my bond. Batman, and I promise not to reveal the location of your fortress of solitude, ... or your secret identity, Clark Kent. Story over.
Yeah.
It's like, damn right,
Great
Batman
ending.
knows. Yep. And then Anderson has fun because he has an author's note at the end. And he says, readers may have noticed that some details in this novel differ from our version of the late 1950s. For instance, the real Senator McCarthy died several months before the launch of Sputnik. And had he been alive at the time, he would surely have suffered a stroke to see such a blatant demonstration of Soviet superiority in a space race. So that dips into that's the whole thing we didn't even talk about was like how Lex uses McCarthy and uses Cold War and the aliens, like combines the hysteria and just being completely, I don't know what you want to call it. What am I thinking? The caps for people, conspiracy theories, like
Oh, okay.
with everything, like Lex
Tinfoil
uses
cap.
him pretty well. Thank you. Gosh, brains out. Um, in our 1950s, no Soviet nuclear missiles were in fact launched in the United States, nor was Sputnik shot out of the sky. So that also is used in here of or Lex with the general doing a fake, like really rolling the dice here of launching nuclear missiles at the US and Lex shooting them out of the sky. That's an interesting plot line that we didn't talk about, but thank God for Superman.
Yes.
And then at the very last line in the author's note, the role of Superman and Batman in historical events is, of course, perfectly accurate.
Love it.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, so Superman Space Age and then the just first issue just dropped, Batman Dark Age, written by Mark Russell with art by Michael Allred. Actually go back 2 episodes and I got to talk with Mark Russell here about that book. But he talked about it's like a blending of historical events within the DC worlds that he uses. And Superman, it's almost like inserting Superman into real historical events. Whereas Dark Age with Batman is almost going to be like almost like Bruce interacting with history happening to him in Gotham sort of deal. I felt like in this book a lot was it totally worked for me, like Superman Space Age, in the sense of like Superman interacting with history, going into certain events, Area 51 at the time, um, the Cold War hysteria, the nukes and stuff like that. I thought it was done really well and not in a way that's like eye rolly, you know?
I agree. Yeah. It fits the time very well, and I think he tailored how he was writing the characters to fit the time period, because Superman's always been sort of like you described Jimmy earlier. There's always a little bit of that Americana
Mm-hmm.
apple pie, aw shucks. Um,
Smallville-ness.
yeah, but that fits this time period so
Yeah.
perfectly, and you can crank that up to 11 in this
Mm-hmm.
story. So I think he did a great job with that.
I like they said that even apple pie because when he goes to Smallville one time, Martha is making apple pie. He goes
Apple
back another
pie.
time and she makes cherry pie. Good old Martha.
Yes.
Is there anything? I have a couple questions for you, but was there anything else you wanted to mention briefly?
Oh gosh, there's
I know
there's
there's a
so
lot,
much
but
in the story. It's hard to really cover everything. But no,
mhm.
I think we touched the points I was really wanting to. So I
Okay.
think I'm good.
Let me ask you some questions then.
Yes, you've got a question?
Sure. I can't wait for the favorite panel question.
Okay. Favorite panel. Um, a little different, but pretty close to the usual questions.
Okay.
Let's start with the common one. What was your favorite part of Enemies and Allies?
Favorite part was and I probably shouldn't have said it earlier, but it's the final page that we just talked about. Just solidifying those two characters coming together, and there's a trust, and that in each each of their skill sets they know who the other is without, they didn't
Yeah.
even have to do much work or show the work. They know who each other is, and there's a trust, and I love that. This is very, very Tim verse Batman and Superman.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Uh, for the sake of being different, and I can't narrow it down. There's more than one, but whenever it's Bruce and Alfred in the cave,
Mm,
just for me, it's like there's a Norm Brayfogle piece of art that is like Bruce without the cowl on, but in the suit at the chair, looking up at a monitor, and Alfred's behind him, and uh you get cave behind. I love stuff like that visually. And there was, even a sign in here, like you even mentioned earlier, of when he's got the cowl sitting there on the desk, like a monster looking at him. So he's sitting there in the suit, but without the cowl. And he's
mhm.
at the monitor, him talking with Alfred, similar situations. Like, I just really kind of love that stuff. Like in the
Sure.
cave, because it is like he's in Batman land. So he's mostly dressed as Batman, but he'll take off the cowl. So he's got like, it's almost like he makes it, I'm going to make this realistic and not as silly. So I'll take off the mask, but I'm still going to wear the suit. I don't know. I
Mhm.
love scenes in the cave. A different question. Let's say that this became a comic book.
Okay.
Kevin J. Anderson's going to write it. Who would you want illustrating it?
Alex
Uh,
Ross.
Alive or dead? Oh, you son of a bitch.
I mean, alive
Yeah,
or
that's a
dead. I
good
mean,
one.
this fits Darwin Cook so well.
Yeah.
So if we still had Darwin Cook, I mean, I would be fine with either him or Alex Ross, but I think either one of those could nail it out of the park.
Man.
Possibly with covers by Lee Bermejo.
Hey. Hey. Well, I'll never say no.
Just because I remember that old school picture that Bermejo did of Batman in like the old throwback suit, the frumpy looking costume.
from the
I think he could.
serials,
Yes, I think
that
he
one,
could
yeah.
nail like a McCarthy era Batman
Yeah.
and
Uh,
Superman.
whatever you'd want to do, I'd say, yeah, please. But man,
Yeah.
as much as I even said of like I envision Alex Ross, I was almost thinking of like I could see Bruce Timm doing all of this, but that's almost too. We've gotten that in a sense, so I would want something visually different. Um, I'm gonna be boring and go with you, yeah, Alex Ross, and I'm not. That's not like my go-to. I don't
Mhm.
honestly like for some stories, I'm not like instant like Alex Ross, definitely. Like, God, the guy is amazing and does amazing work. But I think this era, because he focuses his art Marvel and DC, he does such like classic versions of the
Yeah.
characters. So I just think, yeah, definitely that makes so much sense. And I think that would be the best fit for the story in a comic. Well done. Now, would you like to see this adapted in animation?
Absolutely. I think
Absolutely.
this would, much like the Gotham by Gaslight, or the what was the Doom that came to Gotham that we got recently.
Yeah.
DC Animation does a really good job with like the throwback style.
Hmm.
Um, so I think they could nail this, and New Frontier as well. So definitely an Elseworlds tale. So I don't know if it would really fit in with the new direction that James Gunn is going with animation.
Yeah.
But if he's doing Elseworlds there too, that would be cool.
Yeah, I almost think what's not so New Frontier did a really good job mimicking Cook's look, his style. I think Justice League Action does a pretty good job too, especially of Batman, like what
Mhm.
his suit looks like. So I don't know who, that animation who does it. That look I think could work for this. I'm all for making it like stand out, not just do another, oh yeah, this looks just like the line that they've been doing. I would want something different. I wouldn't want the
Oh
Archer
yeah.
animation for this. I'd want it to be something different. And like looking at Justice League Action style, I'm like, ooh, I think that could fit. Almost providing because the story itself almost provides a little bit of like warmth, but underlying like real serious shit, you know,
Mhm.
not too dark, but a little bit, little snippets, it's just covered with a warm, fuzzy lens. So I think something that could do that, I don't know, that could accompany that really well in animation. Uh, Final thoughts, enemies and allies. What you got?
Um, Probably my favorite novel based on
Ooh.
comic characters. Um, and I hesitate to say, favorite Batman novel because even though I did put that on the list for that Holy Batcast ISO challenge, it was so fresh in my mind at that time. But I don't know that I'd pick another Batman novel over it. I have such a fun time in the world with these two characters, getting to know each other and building that trust and getting time with Alfred and getting a lot of time with Lois and Jimmy and seeing some of my favorite pieces of the DC universe in this book, as well as I'm a sucker for period pieces. So
Mhm.
throwing it back in this era, um, yeah, it's a really fun book, one that I revisit probably once every couple of years at this point since I first read it. Um, and I don't know, like I don't read No Man's Land every 2 years or
Mhm.
anything like that. So I think that's high praise because it's one that
Yeah.
I love reading. So
Uh, this is the only first read for me.
sure.
I'll definitely read it. It'll probably be a couple years. I
Yeah.
bought this I bought this during the pandemic because I was a madman and was just like buying stuff online. Um,
Yeah.
but I knew I would read it at some point. I'm glad you picked it because obviously that like, yeah, that kicks my butt into gear of like, all right, this is it. This is the next one. Like I'm gonna read it now, finally. And I'm really glad that I did because I did. I really enjoyed it. It had that combination, like I said at the top, of blending these different versions of Batman and Superman, that I've been exposed to in different mediums. So that was just like really fun. And I think that it did the characters, I think did the characters justice. I don't think anybody got shorthanded. That for the story that Anderson wanted to tell here. And I think everything just really added up. And like he apparently said, about like the focus was on, characterization and stuff. And I think it really was. So you were attached to each character like at their hip and going through the story with them. And it was, I don't know, it was really, I don't know, it was really fun to read. I liked it quite a bit. So um I know Joe and Paul aren't going to read this, but anybody else, if they listen to it and they want to give it a shot, I highly recommend it. Like, yeah, you can take a break from a comic and read this. And it wasn't like it wasn't a breeze of a read, but it wasn't like I was reading, Game of Thrones. It was a couple of
Right.
sit downs. I did it in like commuting to work, like on 2 different days, and that took out a massive chunk. And that was just like another morning. I woke up and I sat and I read for like 45 minutes. And it was, so don't be intimidated by the non-pictures. It's not that bad of a read.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a copy as well, you can get, since Ryan's got the signed copy there, you can get
Woo!
some signed Anderson copies, first editions on eBay, and they're not bad. Like 25 bucks. So
I
yeah,
don't
check it out.
know where he rests these days, but I'd like to call and confirm that I have the only copy that's signed to Katie. So, Katie, if
Where
you're out
he
there, just let me know.
where
I'll
Kevin
give you your
Anderson
book back.
is? Oh, Katie.
Where Kevin
So
Anderson is, yeah. He signed it. He
so
signed this to Katie. Faster than a speeding bullet.
so just a tangent. He's a Colorado native. So
I saw that. Track
yeah,
him
and
down.
he actually went into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame in the same class as Stephen
Nice.
King, which
Wow, good
is
for him.
interesting. Yeah, so pretty cool.
Nice. Eric Carter, thanks for coming back on the Batman Book Club and picking a book I never read before.
My
And you're
pleasure.
back in my good graces because now you'd see you're 5 for 6 on things that I like.
Good, good.
Yeah, you're back at it. So why don't you go ahead and tell anybody who doesn't know where to follow you?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you can find me on my own podcast, The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast with my co-host that we've taken jabs at here today,
Your
Joe
employee.
Fornerado.
Yes.
And then you can find our socials at TFR Bat Pod. That's Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram. And then my personal accounts, you can find me on Instagram, X, and Letterboxd at mecarter89.
Sweet deal. Let's see. For the Batman Book Club on the socials at the Batman BC, latest episode drops, upcoming episodes. And yeah, there's some cool stuff like that episode 200 that I think is going to work out. That'll be a lot of fun. So you'll find out through there. Subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel. Pete and I are going to get back into No Man's Land. We've actually had people question and ask, is that really going to happen? I promise you, it's gonna. We're gonna dive into No Man's Land. The comic, not the prose novel, Paul. If you want to support the show, a variety of ways you can do that. Patreon.com/the-BatmanBC, tpublic.com, type TBBC for the Batman Book Club in the search. And if you want to support the show, but you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. The easiest, quickest, and most impactful thing you can do to help this show is rate and review the show. So wherever you listen to it, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, just go to the rate and review page, rate and review the show, because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, the word is panic. So for Eric Carter, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, read my Batman comics or prose novels.